Liz, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we've just been doing the thing that at the BBC my producer always tells me off for, which is having a really great conversation before the mic has been turned on, which is what we've just been doing for the last 20 minutes, is catching up and talking about this. And inevitably, we ended up talking about writing, and none of that has been recorded. That's our own private memory now that we have of the conversation. But you're about to tell a story about your family history, and I said, "Stop! Let me turn the mics on."
There was a reason I was going to say it as well, which is to do with writing, and it's to do with the kind of cliches that you find in writing, and how actually sometimes you discover that it's not, that the cliche is a real thing. And so it's when I had a shock, basically. And like in old films when they hold a kind of teacup and a saucer, and it kind of, I'm going to make a little sound effect now, like a kind of like the sort of nervous thing where the cup kind of shakes on the saucer. It actually happened to me.
You were actually holding a cup and saucer.
I was holding a cup and saucer, and I had a bit of a shock, and the cup and saucer started shaking, and my first response, my brain just immediately went, oh, that's real then. That's interesting. Rather than
there's a disconnect, isn't it? There's a disassociation. Yeah.
But I think that's a really useful skill to have as a writer, because it is that thing of that's our coping mechanism, isn't it? I think, really. But yeah, no, my aunt had accidentally let slip that my granddad, my dad's father, wasn't my biological grandfather, which I sort of soon realised fairly quickly wasn't, to me, actually, it didn't really matter. But I didn't know, and I assumed no one else in my family knew, and she assumed everyone in our family knew, and so I had to kind of try and work out whether my dad knew or not. Anyway, the short answer is he didn't. So I found out before him by quite a long way, like 20 plus years.
Oh, so
it's one heck of a secret to have to.
So you carried that around with you for 20 years. So his father was not his biological father.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I found out by accident, but I wasn't sure if he did know and he hadn't told us, but no, he definitely.
And you didn't want him to know that you knew if he didn't want you to know.
Well, yeah, and also, so I looked up, actually, this is a very pragmatic thing to do. I looked up adoption advice, and the official advice, I don't know if it's still the same, I assume it is, because it makes perfect sense, is that if you find out someone is adopted in some shape or form, and they don't know, it is not for you to tell them. It is not your responsibility to tell them. So I took that advice literally. I like rules. So I was like, I follow that rule. That seems a good rule.
Well, most importantly, when did the incident with the teacup happen? Was that when your aunt?
That's when I found out. Yeah, I mean, God, honestly, my poor aunt didn't. I mean, I call her my aunt. It's complicated. She's like my dad's second cousin or something, but I think of her as my aunt. But yeah, she thought we knew. But it was just one of those moments where I didn't feel shocked. I just thought, oh my gosh, that makes quite a lot of sense, actually. But it was the teacup that I just remember thinking, oh, that's true.
That really. So your body was reacting.
Yeah.
And your mind
almost before.
Your mind was taking note of the way your body reacted.
Yeah, which I now think, actually, this is long before I got published, is a really writerly response.
Yeah.
That ability to step out of yourself and kind of go, interesting, make note for later.
Well, it's true, because I think I've definitely had occasions where, like, if somebody's really made me angry and I'm trying to be cool, and I am spending some energy noticing how bad my poker face is, and I'm there. I've no specific occasions where I'm there, and I'm trying to concentrate on not looking angry, whilst also going, I'm not doing a very good job at not looking angry. And then you're kind of, there's also a part of you in the, maybe a little voice in the distance, wondering how you would write that on the page. How would you make a good stab at going, without delving into something a bit tedious in saying, describing somebody's physical reaction compared to how they want to be reacting.
Yeah.
That's definitely happened to me a few times. Not the
Yeah,
right.
I've like you, I struggle massively with poker face. I can't, I simply can't do it. I've had people in meetings like suddenly burst out laughing, and I thought, what are they laughing at? And then they've come out afterwards and they've said, your face, when someone said something that I just clearly, there was one particular meeting that I'm thinking of, and there was a man who I worked with who just didn't seem the most competent of people. Really nice man, but just he turned up for this meeting and he was supposed to kind of brought out these printouts that we had every week to look at things. And he hadn't printed it out to the right size. So it was over like kind of a million different sheets of paper, like different bits of it and different things. And I don't know what my face did, but I remember my other colleague just suddenly like trying to, when someone laughs and tries to cover it by pretending there's coughing or sneezing. She totally did that. And she said, your face, she said, your sheer exasperation had just, but it really made me ultra aware. I'm much more aware of it now, I think. And I think that's a good thing because, I mean, I don't know what else was going on in his life that day.
Well, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so, I feel like it's not a fair judgment, but also I am incredibly impatient. So I think those things just clearly came across in my face.
And you
So
can't,
yeah,
yeah,
rein
and
it
you,
in, Hyder.
yeah. I remember once, it was brought home to me just how awful I must be sometimes when, I can't remember what the exact incident was, but I know me and Amelia were abroad and we were having dinner, and I was having some exotic food that was a bit ambitious for me, I think, and I was having a bit of trouble with it, and she thought it was, I can't remember what it was, but she thought it was hilarious, and she was like, you've got to see the mess you're in. Let me take a photo. And as I look up, I'm like, I do not need a photo taken right now. I need like some cloths and some apparatus. And I look up and she takes the photo, and I just feel like I'm in a sort of desperate state. But what the photo caught was the face of a murderer. And I can see it now, and I remember just thinking, my God, is that what I look like when I'm mildly annoyed by someone? Because that's
my
not good. That's not
No, my
good.
mum calls mine the death stare. The death stare. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't even know it was a thing that that I did or I
No, I
could
didn't
do,
know I
but
could.
yeah, no, it's apparently the death stare.
So we were talking before about, I mean, we're going in slightly the wrong order, but talking about your new book that's coming out later this year, and talking about well, something that's sort of very close to me at the moment, because it's what I've been doing for my new book, but is putting like traumatic life experiences into your work. So
Hmm.
let's go back and touch on, if we can, touch on a few of the things we were talking about before I turn the microphones on. Try to capture some of that magic.
See,
But
it's research. It's a research chat.
it was a research chat, yeah, making sure the levels were right. That's what I always like to say. Um, but yeah, I mean, we could talk about this till the cows come home, right? Because there's so many aspects to put in real life into a book, and I'm writing a book at the moment about the flood to Monmouth that happened last year, and a lot of the processes of writing that is figuring out how to put people. I mean, it's a non-fiction book, right? So yours is a fiction work, right? So you're
Yeah.
using the themes from your experience to create fictional stories.
Yeah, I think I'd always do that actually, really. I mean, I love nonfiction. I read a lot of nonfiction, but I feel like for me, I couldn't write it. I can write short journalistic pieces, but writing something longer that's nonfiction, I think I would kind of struggle with it just because I like to, I like to veer away from the truth, basically. um, and I quite like the idea that in fiction you can kind of reach a different kind of truth as well, without wishing to sound a bit Yeah, without wishing to sound a bit kind of Trumpian. um, uh,
I thought you were
because
going
I
to go
think
with
I just want to
old-fashioned
say
pretentiousness.
facts are important, people. I like a fact. Um, but yeah, no, The Teller of Tall Tales. So it's a children's book, and it's, I'd say, sort of lower YA, so sort of 11 plus. But it's about a grandmother being estranged from her sort of one and only grandchild, and it's about being allowed to see each other once a month and their relationship. But every month, the grandmother tells the sort of teenage grandchild a story, and those stories are sort of kind of somewhere between folklore and fairy tale, but they carry a kind of a truth in them that is sort of relevant to both of them at that point in their life. So it takes place over a year. So it's about lots of things. It's about the power of storytelling and about the power of stories to see us through challenging times, really, as sort of as a kind of, not just as a coping mechanism, but as a sort of as a source for joy as well. So it's a sad book in many ways. It's a sort of profoundly sad but profoundly joyful book about sort of the nature of life and, like I say, yeah, a celebration of stories. So it's almost like a short story collection.
Mhm.
So you could flick through it and read the short stories just sort of as they are, but it's also a novel.
Did you want to write a short story collection, and is this the way to tie them all together? I mean, it's a great framework. It's absolutely, that just sounds great. But was that like a way to tie the stories you had together?
I mean, yeah, sort of, but also I did want to. I didn't want to just write a short story collection. I would love to write a short story collection, actually. But for this one, I wanted them to. I Originally, I thought, oh, it's a framing device to kind of pull them together, and then of course the framing device can't really exist without those stories, and the stories can't really exist without the framing device. I mean, the stories can exist without the framing device, but it felt much more like, without sounding too poncy, like much more like a double helix structure
Hmm.
than here's a collection of short stories with a framing device. It's those things are completely intertwined, and so some of the short stories that I'd envisaged writing, they've gone. They're not in the. They didn't make it because they weren't relevant to the sort of the overall, that relationship between the grandmother and the grandchild and how that develops. Those stories didn't feel like they had anything to say to that, so they've been shelved,
That
which I'd
that
like. I think that's always a healthy thing. Get rid of the
yeah.
stuff that's not working, right? Like, ruthless editor.
That tradition of, because you find it in lots of old storytelling traditions of having uh, a grandparent and a child. That's a really effective way of bridging the gap of the nonsense of adulthood, right? So you've got the kid and the old person who are supposed to traditionally share some elements of innocence, or would you say that's right? Elements of innocence? I mean, I don't know. Is there anything innocent about an old person? I don't know.
I think that, yeah, I mean, I think there can be, because also I think there is that sort of, you know, there is a sort of almost like a second childhood, I think, can often happen when people are much older. And that is partly if they are a grandparent, that kind of having young people around allows them to be silly again and to do all those kind of different things. It allows them to kind of, I don't want to say indulge in a second child, because it's not an indulgence. I think it's essential. I think play is essential, and I think dicking around is a key part of play. Like, let's embrace it, people. Um, but yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing, because it is, like you say, actually, it is cutting out that kind of adult. I hadn't thought of it like that, but yeah, I think that is a reason why that is such a kind of it's a powerful thing in stories, really, I think. But also, there's a sort of central question at the heart of it, which is, why haven't they seen each other? How comes the teenager is now a teenager and hasn't
Mm.
really ever met their grandmother before? Like, what's the story? And so that's kind of one of the things that comes. That's another story that kind of comes out in the tales.
I often think, like, when you see those stories of the child and the grandparent connecting in through stories, and in those ways, that the parent then is something of like a soft obstacle to what really matters in life, which is storytelling and art and creativity, because they got to cook the dinners and pay the bills, and they're always they're always a little bit in the way. I'm thinking I mean, there are many examples, but I'm thinking immediately of The Princess Bride, right, where you've got
Oh yeah.
the grandfather, you've got Peter Falk reading to Fred Savage, who's ill, and in the background downstairs in the distance is the parent who's sort of having to get on with running the house and having a job, and while the kid's sick in bed, and the granddad could come up and read the story. And there is something about, is it something about, this is the last opportunity you're going to have as a child now to be a child, and you can do that with the guidance of your grandparent before you have to quickly grow up and deal with adulthood, which is a constant, if you're that way inclined, is a constant struggle to try and maintain some of the lessons of childhood.
Wales Arts Review is back, and it's a podcast. Or rather, the new Wales Arts Review is being built before your very eyes around the central column of my conversations with some of the most interesting and vital cultural figures working today. But for us to survive and grow this time, we very much need your help. If you like what we're doing, like what we stand for, then like our posts, and most importantly, subscribe. The more subscribers to our Substack newsletter and YouTube channel, the better placed we will be to grow and pay writers to tackle the most pressing cultural subjects of the day. Via Substack, you can become a paid subscriber and gain access to exclusive content and an ever-growing Wales Arts Review archive. And by hitting the subscribe button on our YouTube channel, not only do you let the platform know you'd like to see more of our stuff, but you increase the chances of us drawing down revenue from ads. All that goes back into Wales Arts Review to help us grow and improve. We need your support. Press those buttons and then go and enjoy our stuff. It's all for you anyway.
I think it's also that you can have a different relationship with someone who is a relative, but who is not your immediate, not your parents. So whether that is your grandchild or whether that is your grandparents, or whether it is, like my aunt, who's my dad's second cousin, but my aunt, because it's just easier. Like it is, to have a kind of different relationship. It opens up that thing of being family, but family in a family of a different generation is, you can have a different relationship with them. You've kind of got, the fact that you've got that generation in between means that you can have that, you've got almost like permission to have a very different relationship with them, because they're, like you say, they're not going to have to cook your dinner, they're not going to have to do those things. It's interesting that you mentioned The Princess Bride, because I hadn't really quite realised until I kind of was already writing it that that's clearly a key influence. But actually, that's the bit in The Princess Bride that used to annoy me the most. When I first watched The Princess Bride, I was like, I don't care about the old dude. I don't care about Columbus reading his story to that boring kid. Whatevs. I was interested in. I wanted the fun in it. I wanted the fun, and I wanted the fairy tale, and I wanted, there is actually a character called Andre the Giant, which is my little homage.
Oh, nice.
There's a character called Andre the Giant. But I wanted to go back to Mandy Patinkin. I wanted to go back to those characters. I wasn't interested in that device, actually. And so I was really mindful of trying to create something that wasn't like that for my, for kind of my story. And also the storyteller, the Jim Henson series with John Hurt as the storyteller.
Yeah.
And the big kind of Muppety dog played by Brian Henson.
Yeah.
Which I loved that series. And there is that kind of, that sort of, I read a lot of kind of fairy tales and folklore and stuff when I was a kid, and that's definitely fed into it, I think.
Was that framing device, though, with the Jim Henson storytelling and the Princess Bride? Were you always in other aspects? Were you always just fighting to get through that frame to get to the, because I think with the Princess Bride, not as it, yeah, not with what I've written, and not with the Jim Henson one. Right,
Jim Henson,
okay.
I loved that. I loved him and the dog. I loved the relationship between the two of them. I loved the fact the dog's a bit grumpy. The dog's seen it all before. He's fed up with those stories. I love the dynamic. The dynamic between them, I think, is brilliant. Whereas in The Princess Bride, I don't know whether it's because I've watched it as an adult, and I still love the film, but I mean, it is a profoundly sexist film, actually. If you watch it as a kind of modern person now, where you go, why is the princess got literally nothing to do? She just looks pretty. And you've cast like Robin Wright, who's an amazing actress, and
Yeah,
she's
who's quite
literally
kick-ass.
poor old Buttercup's got like very little like agency in it at all. And she's just there to look pretty and be rescued, which I obviously these days again I find somewhat objectionable. So it's also that kind of like, how do you tell, you know, the joy of fairy tales and folklore is that you can retell them, right? So it's like trying to take all those elements of things that I really love, like the storyteller, like the Princess Bride, like, you know, a lot of the Andrew Lang fairy tale books, you know, sort of Scottish folklore, Finnish folklore, think loads of the stuff that I read as a kid, and then make my own sort of fairy tale folklore out of it. Make my own short stories that nod to a lot of those things, with little nods to like M.R. James and things as well, you know. And the joy of that was, yeah. But the thing that surprised me, I guess, in the writing of it was how much the framing device and the stories kind of meld together. Actually, like a stick of rock, I think is better rather than double helix. A stick of rock.
Yeah, try
That's
and keep your
less.
feet on the ground, please.
Less.
Stick of rock.
That's less fancy. Just like a stick of rock.
I don't even know who you are anymore. Now you're a big successful writer, having helixes and everything. But I'm interested. I'm going to in danger of labouring the point, but I'm interested in this framing device and what your attachment to it, because almost everything you've named there, even as far as M.R. James, is very, very connected to framing device. M.R. James always begins with somebody is telling you this ghost story over cigars and port. You know, it's always a story within a story. And sometimes with M.R. James, it's not there for any other reason than to have some kind of detached voice, right? It's just somebody...
Yeah.
You know, it's somebody going, I bumped into this man on holiday and he told me this ghost story. And you're like, well, who are you? Why am I listening to you? Why don't you just tell me the ghost? Just M.R. James.
W.W. Jacobs as well, who I'm a massive fan of. I know Mark Gatiss is a huge fan of Jacobs as well. He's a fantastic short story writer. And it's always, you know, it's like, as the lighthouse keeper puffed on his pipe, well, never see like a day like yesterday again, will we? He said, you know, when you're just like, I'm in. I don't know what's going to go on. He's going to tell a story, but I'm in. You know, I mean, I love a framing device. I really love them. And then some of my favourite H.G. Wells stories as well. Do you know The Green Door?
Yes. Yeah.
It's just, it's one of my favourite short stories, and I kind of forgotten about it. And I reread, I think all of H.G. Wells' short stories. I mean, it's a book about 5 inches thick, so I'm pretty sure it's most of them. And The Green Door was in it, and it was one of my favourites when I was a kind of a kid. And rereading it, it's such an odd story. I mean, I think he's a brilliant, hugely underrated writer, actually, really, these days, particularly for short stories. I think The Green Door is one that has haunted me. It haunts me, and I just that thing of, like you say, I am actually. I think it's only talking through it, isn't it? It's one of those things that's always interesting, talking to kind of sort of having a conversation where you've realised that actually lots of different things have played into it, and that I love framing devices, and I hadn't realised it. I guess it's a confidence thing as well, because I think to pull off a good framing device, you've got to have, like you say, like with the M.R. James ones, you've got to have the kind of balls to do it, really, to kind of go, here's a story, here's a person you don't know, and they're about to tell you a story. Rather than here is a story.
So when you say it's a confidence thing, you mean a lack of confidence?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
That's
So yeah, that's really interesting. So the framing device is, you're kind of putting the onus on this character you've created to get it to be convincing and to get everything right.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Even though you're still writing it, right? They're not actually real. Yeah.
But it's like you're writing it at a distance, so you've got the voice of the story is the voice of, you know, that person's telling the story. So I'm not telling the story. That character's telling the story. But I play about with perspective and tense in it as well. And I think one of the things that I'm most interested in is when I have that sense of, with an idea of, that sense of, and then that'd be really hard. But if I could pull it off, that'd be that'd be that'd be interesting, wouldn't it? So it's like a challenge, I
Yeah.
think, really. So it's like I always want to have that. That's always the thing that makes me determine what the next idea is. It's the one that makes me go, oh God, that's going to be really hard.
That's going to be
How am I going
really
to do
hard.
that?
Well,
Yeah.
sorry, no, go on.
No, I was just going to say just that challenge of it. And so I've got the teenage character is second person, and the grandmother is third person, and that's present tense
Hmm.
when we're in the kind of the real world, and then the grandmother Omar, she tells the stories third person, like past. So
That's
yeah, it's
that is a challenge. That's a really
but
good
actually that
way.
makes it sound more complicated than it feels to
In
read
in
it.
in
Because
in the yeah, in the reading experience, all you're doing is making sure that the reader knows exactly where they are at all times, right?
yeah,
And consciously, that's what they're getting by having the changes in perspective.
yeah, and I wanted to write second person because I know quite a few boys read my books, and I kind of go around to schools and do events and stuff, and it's always really interesting talking to the boys. I'm really pleased that I get that boys read my kind of kids' books. But I also wanted it to feel I all like playing with gender anyway, but I don't give the grandchild a gender.
Mm,
Um, so and because it is second person, I like that element that you can see yourself in that character,
yeah.
in some shape or form, that it gives you a kind of a direct contact with that character in a slightly different way. So that was kind of a very deliberate choice for me as well. Not just, kind of like, hey boys, like you can read this book too, but just more just I like the kind of the sort of the openness of that. And I was like a real I was a real tomboy kind of growing up. And I know that's a word that's sort of fallen out of fashion now, but that kind of almost like gender neutrality, that kind of what we would now call non-binary, I think is really interesting. And I talk to a lot of kind of teenagers who are, having struggles with their identity, and I like the fact that that character is open, so you can interpret them as a non-binary character, as a female character, as a male character. It doesn't matter. You
I
can see yourself in them.
Yeah, I don't think literature does that enough. I don't. I think there's too much, particularly in. I mean, you're far more of an expert in this than I am, but uh, I think particularly in young adult fiction and children's fiction, this move which has happened towards identity politics and making sure that all whereas it used to be less important in children's literature because and I use literature in that sort of traditional term, the really good stuff that has literary thematic depth and craft and style, things like Roald Dahl and Morpurgo and all. It was less important because kids traditionally don't so much have those identities, right? They are you know sort of rolling, and I remember reading Left Hand of Darkness, which obviously is not a children's book, but Le Guin was a great writer for what became known as YA. And you read The Left Hand of Darkness, and about 50 pages in you go, oh my god, wait a minute, is he black? It just and you're like, oh right, okay, yeah, well, yeah, why not? But I didn't realize, because I hadn't been thinking, it hadn't been put on page one. It didn't say this is the identity of your protagonist, this is what they look like, and this is their sexuality, and this is all so I think it's that's really interesting that you've done it that way, and it's not like it's not this, but it's like more interesting than that.
Yeah, I've left, and I wanted to leave it open. I think that's the thing is like,
Mm.
in Bearmouth, which was my first one, the main character of Newt, I'm going to do spoilers. It's just,
I mean,
it's a
how
book
old is
from
it?
7 years ago. I feel
Yeah, I was
like
going to
I can
say
do
there's
spoilers.
like a 5-year moratorium,
Yeah,
right?
I think it's fine, isn't it?
Yeah.
But Newt, the main character, because that's first person and written dialect that I made up, that's stolen from all sorts of different places in a mishmash. But Newt is you assume Newt's a boy because it's in a coal mine and it's a working coal mine, and everyone else it's a male environment, sort of dystopian thriller. But she starts her period about halfway through the book,
Yeah.
and then has to deal with the kind of fallout of all of that. And again, I wanted that to be like a sort of bit of a sort of kind of a shock, really. I don't think it matters if you guess, and I don't think it matters hugely if you know actually before you read the book. But I like playing with gender. I think it's a really interesting thing. Like in some of my adult books, grown up, they're not adult.
Oh, that's for a
Not
different
that
podcast.
kind. Yeah, that's a different podcast. But in my kind of grown up books, I have characters dress up, like female characters dress up as men and can do different things. And I always think that's quite an interesting. It's just an interesting thing to play with, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
And so this is kind of taking it in a slightly different. This is taking it in a slightly different direction. And at a time, I think teenagers are always going to question their identity. That's part of growing up. And I think that's the point when most people are most questioning of who they are and what they are.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of reflect that, really, I suppose. That's kind of why I did it. And I couldn't be bothered to make up a name for the character as well, really. That's the honest truth.
We've all
Not
been
really.
We've all been there. But with the Newt thing in Bearmouth, I remember that moment, and because Newt as a character name immediately takes me to Aliens, which even though in Aliens Newt is a little girl, there are moments when some of the soldiers who aren't really looking properly, and because she's so covered in mud and dirt, and they just think she's a little boy or whatever, because it's all like subtext in it, but they kind of assume, well, a girl wouldn't have survived this long on her own. It must be a boy under all that dirt. Because I think there's a moment, isn't there, where Ripley is cleaning her and goes, I think there's a really pretty little girl underneath all here, and there's little moments like that. So when that happened, I was in the space of like, well, this is Newt, and then in the mine as well, all the dust and the dirt. I was in that sort of space with the character. So it's really interesting that that you picked that name, and it did a very similar thing for me as it did in the Aliens film.
Again, I've got a brilliant memory for some things and an absolutely shocking memory for other things. And it was only after it was kind of when it was already being printed that I was like, oh, Newt, like a film I've seen like a million times. Like I love that film. I think it's phenomenal. I don't think Michael Biehn's ever been better. Like it's just a great film. And I just had that moment of, oh yeah,
it's a great name though. It's a great name.
Yeah, and also that kind of that newts are such sort of interesting creatures. That they are kind of sort of underground, but they're of the water as well, and that they can exist in very different environments. I just think it's a good name to play with. So I don't regret calling my Newt that. But it wasn't a deliberate. Well, I mean, it was a subconscious. Homage.
Yeah, these
things. And I'm fine. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, you should be. Yeah, if you're going to steal from the best, I think, even if you're going to do it unconsciously, steal the best idea.
Then the thing that worries me though is that, like, because my memory can be terrible for things like that it is literally a kind of like, oh yeah, the M.R. James thing. Oh, whoops. But I do worry that like I've accidentally stolen something. But I don't think I have.
No. I don't think anybody.
Because I've redone it in a different way. It's fine.
I don't think James Cameron's going to be coming after you after this podcast. Although he does listen. Obviously, he does listen in.
Oh yeah, well obviously. Hi James. Hi Jim.
Jim, of course, Jim Cameron.
Yeah.
I was having a coffee this morning. There were two old guys on the table next to me, and they were talking about memory loss as they get older. And the one guy said, I can't remember anything nowadays, but I've taken to thinking it as that I'm just becoming noun free.
Oh, that's lovely. Noun free.
I'm becoming noun free, which
that's lovely.
Which I'm going to be using forever. In fact, you're about the third person I've told today, and this only happened about 10 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, do you know what? There's going to be a magazine called that by the end of the week. there'll be there'll be like an online zine thing called Noun Free by the end of the week.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
if I
it's too
haven't
late.
done
You
it,
can't hold
somebody
it
will do.
anymore. You've let it out into the
It's
world.
I
It's
know,
gone.
it's out
It's
there.
gone. It's too
Everyone will be
late.
using it.
You
Noun
can't
free.
catch it. Oh, that's
Um,
beautiful.
yeah, that's nice, though, isn't it? But talk a little bit, because I've loved all your books, and tell me a little bit more about Bearmouth, because I mean, we knew each other quite a while before that came out, but I was always really struck at how sort of flagrantly ambitious that book was as a debut, um, and to have that connect with people in the industry must have been a real, like, I don't know, high five moment. I don't know, but to do something that was that, as you say, it's written in a dialect that you invented, and you must have come up against editors who are like, nah, sorry, this is going to be way too much for the readership. You come up against people in the industry all the time, right? Who just think, who see when they're looking for excuses to turn you down, their number one excuse is, for the readership are too stupid to get any of this.
We don't know how to market it is always the thing that I get.
Yeah.
That's generally that's the feedback that I get. I mean, I've been very lucky with all three of my kind of young adult books with Pushkin Press, who are phenomenal, who are a sort of smaller indie who punch way above their weight. Yeah, I mean, Bearmouth was, so I love saying this because I think it's really important for other writers to hear, particularly kind of writers who aren't yet published. So Bearmouth was my 7th book that I'd written, but the first to get published. And yes, the other 6 are all in the bin where they belong. And elements of them turn up in other things sometimes, actually. So it's not, I always think that nothing's wasted, So you learn by doing. And I think there is that element of people wanting to kind of hear that there's some kind of shortcut or something. And, some people are just kind of pop out and they're really brilliant writers really young, like the Zadie Smiths of this world. But I think the majority of writers who get published, it is tenacity. is a key skill, and also to keep challenging yourself, to keep moving on. You can only edit a thing once you've finished the thing in order to edit it. So Bearmouth was, I just wrote it not on a whim, but I wrote it because I was angry. Actually, I quite like writing about things that I get a bit angry about.
What were you angry about?
I went down. I was in Harlech, actually, and there's a place just south of Harlech. I can't remember what they're called. The Slate Caverns that are just a bit south. And I've been there as a child, actually, which I kind of only realised again years later. Oh yeah, I've been here before. And I went down there, and it was fascinating. But it was just reading some of the stuff down there. Like, the boys used to work down there from the age of 12, and they'd slit your right nostril on your first day to see if they could make you cry, to see if you were man enough, age 12, to work down there. And I thought that was that marking, that physical marking, that scarring that you're going to carry with you. You'll always be you'll always be a miner. You'll always have that mark on your nose. It's so visible as well. And there was a figure in the rocks that they used to doff their hats to as they came in and out, almost like a kind of good luck thing. And I was just thinking, this is a cult. This kind of sounds like a kind of dystopian cult, right? And then the third thing that made me kind of think about it was they had a like a kind of stretcher to take people out, like for any injuries, but it was a coffin without a lid. Basically, it was just a lidless coffin, which makes sense because if you're in an enclosed environment, of course, you don't want people's limbs flying out. But it was just the brutality of it, and I came out and I was just sort of shocked, actually, really, I suppose. Even though I knew about I'm more about coal mines, but I knew that mines are not a kind of great, lovely, safe place to work in general. But there was something on the news about, I don't know if you remember this, it was a DPD driver who died. And at the time, I think they have changed their practice now before DPD see you, Gary. But you used to have to pay to put their livery on your van. And that if you couldn't do a shift, you had to find someone else to take your shift, otherwise you'd get fined. And so this guy who was a driver for them, who'd paid to put his livery on their van, he couldn't find people to take his shifts, and he was diabetic. and he had missed hospital appointments, and he died. Basically, he died because of that exploitation. And it was on the radio, and I just remember, I'm going to get angry again now, but it's like, it made me so angry and so upset. And I just thought, that exploitation, the same exploitation that was happening in that mine well over 100 years ago, is still happening now. It's just rebranded itself. It's like, oh, it's opportunity. It's 0 hours contracts. They're really handy. They're great for you. Have you got flexible hours? Yeah, you can do 0. That's where it came from. It came from a place of rage, injustice. And I just thought, well, no one's gonna read it. Like, I'm not gonna. I just, at that point, I thought, I'm never gonna get published. I'm just gonna write something purely for my own entertainment. And that's where it came from. And I think it was such a good lesson, actually, in that I don't think I'd been kind of consciously chasing a market or writing things that I thought, like copying things that were already out there or kind of trying to fit into a niche. I wasn't consciously doing that, but I think the best thing to do is to write the stories that you want to write, and know why you want to write them as well. And then in that way you discover your own voice, even though your voice will shift and change, and but it was a really good lesson to learn. And then Bearmouth did phenomenally well. But I had to have. I'm going to also say this because I think this is important. I'm talking about kind of confidence and stuff. I actually went to see a friend of mine's a counsellor. Thank you, Julia. I went to see my friend who's a counsellor because I couldn't talk about the book. I felt like a fraud because I'd worked in kind of publishing, doing publicity, like as a freelancer working in the arts. I knew quite a few kind of other people in publishing, like other writers and stuff, and I just felt like a fraud. Because I was like, well, they're proper writers, and I'm not. And it's taken me quite a long time, I think, to kind of get my confidence back a bit in that regard. Yeah, like it's sort of an odd thing, really.
When you say
but I
quite
just felt because it was
long time, 5
yeah,
books?
and I felt it was, yeah. I felt it was something. It's exposing, actually. Because your name is on a book that is going to be published. It's going to be in bookshops. You hope, people will read it. But I kind of had this real shell at the time of just everyone's going to hate it because it's dystopian. It's it's in a dialect that I made up. Like, people are going to really kind of hate it. And so I sort of really like tried to build up my shell, and I was like, yeah, people hate it. That's fine. We can deal with that. And then what I hadn't prepared myself for at all was that people would like it or that they'd love it. And that to me was that's why I had to have counselling as well, because I was like, oh, I've not prepared for that. I've prepared for the worst case scenario. I've prepared backup plans.
So it wasn't like, oh, thank God, I prepared myself for the worst and the best has happened. It was, well, no, I'm not actually in the right place to accept all of this praise. I can't process that now.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to talk about that because I don't think that's an uncommon thing. Talking to other writers, I think it's not an uncommon thing of like, people really like it. What do I do now? And now I think I've got to a place. I think with the 12, which was my last one, my last children's book, and then with this one, with Tell It All Tales as well, I feel like I've written the book that I want to write in the way that I want to write it, and I hope people like it, but there's nothing I can do if they don't. But being able to write the book that I want to write in the way that I want to write it and have that published is a huge privilege in itself, and that to me is as good as it gets. And so when the book goes out and does whatever it does, which is almost entirely beyond your control as a writer, you can turn up at as many bookshops as you want and do tap dances dressed in glitter, do which I'm famous for. But you can do all of those things, and the book, it's the paper. It's basically like throwing a paper airplane from a kind of a tower block. You don't know what direction it's going to go in or what's going to happen. But that is the thing that makes me happy. Is that if I can carry on doing that, being able to write the stories that I want to write in the way that I want to write them, and they still get published, that's enough. I mean, if it could make me some money as well along the way, that would be
Yeah,
that'd
I
be
mean,
fabulous.
yeah, but that's
That'd be
just
really good.
that's asking a bit too much there, I
Well,
think.
if as Jim Cameron's listening,
Yeah,
if he can offer the film rights,
but I mean, there's so many lessons in there, aren't there? You writing Bearmouth because you'd got to a point where you're like, well, I need to write this story because I need to get this out and down, and for you not to be thinking about a publisher or or aiming it at somebody, so being completely unencumbered by that aspect of literary ambition, and then
mm,
that being the book that, I mean, it's not the same for everybody, but it's a really common story that people find for some reason or another. They find themselves writing for the purest reasons of writing rather than for career or literary ambition or anything like that. And that
yeah,
is the book. I'd say probably of all the writers I've known and spoken to over 20 years, that is the most common story of success. I mean, the story of success is the least common story of a
yeah,
right of my
yeah,
talk to writers. But out of that little percentage of successful stories, the true success rate is people who have written their own thing in their own way, and
yeah,
it found a home rather
yeah.
than trying to write something that fits somewhere.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of advice out there for writers, and I think there's a lot of advice I don't agree with. And I think the important thing about advice is that you don't have to agree with it. Right? You don't have to go, "That's wise." You can go, "Really?" And I feel like there is a lot of writing advice out there, which is to know the market and find a niche and write for that niche. And I honestly think if you want to write, write
Mm.
and write what you want to write. Because if you're not writing what you want to write, your name is going to be on that book until the end of time, like potentially. And if you're going to be ashamed of that, of your name being on that, maybe that's not what you should be writing. Like, I think ultimately, and again, I hear this a lot, like, who are you writing for? What market are you writing for? Like, what
Mm.
audience are you writing for? And it's like, I'm not psychic. I can't predict the future and I can't predict an audience. And I write for myself. I
Yeah.
write, I write the stories that I want to write because I want to read them. I want to
Yeah.
read the stories that are currently sat in my head, and I can't read them because they don't exist yet. And so the only way that they're going to exist, and the only way that I'm going to get to read them, is if I write them, and that's why I write them. And that's it. Like, that's
I
why I write.
I
I write
think
so I
that
can read those stories.
one of the big moments for me on this idea, because I used to teach creative writing for a long 10 years as well and whatever, and you get into these conversations about, well, you really need to grab the attention of an editor or an agent, so that the opening of your book needs to be something that really grabs your attention. And the one book that I was working on, and I was sending it out, and I thought, oh, this is going to work because I've crafted this opening that it's just really gripping, and this is the opening. I mean, you can't turn away from this opening. I've really got this. And the editor that was interested came back and was like, I really like what you've done here, but I think you need to go slower at the beginning. So it's like, we really like what you've done apart from the thing you had absolutely nailed down for the market. Yeah.
And I
It,
think that's the thing, because you can't predict it. Like, publishing comes in. I mean, if anyone understands publishing, please let me know when you've worked it out, right? And then you get a lot of these people who profess to be experts in publishing, and if they're not. No one is an expert in publishing, really, because I think most people don't understand how it works. It's effectively gambling. They throw a lot of stuff at a wall and see what sticks, and then
mm,
they throw more of the stuff that sticks in the hope that it makes them some more money to throw some other stuff at the wall. Like, that's kind of it. Um, and so much of it is not in your control, but the only thing that you can control are the words on the page. And so that's the bit to kind of focus on. I mean, I did an event last week, and there was advice being given about understand, if you want to get an agent, know who's, know who's out there and study them, and, who's open when, and follow them on social media, and make sure you read the bookseller and all of these things. And I just said, I'm really sorry, I firmly disagree,
Mhm.
because you could study all those things and be none the wiser.
Mm.
Like, and you could spend hours and days doing that and not really understand it. So, I mean, if you want to do it, there's no,
But
by all
the
means, go ahead and do it. But I don't feel like you have to do that. Like,
but
we're all
the
busy.
advice to I was talking about this with an agent fairly recently who I know, that the advice to aspiring writers has become a cottage industry in and of
Yeah.
itself, and I think
Yeah.
that is a bit of an issue. I think that's not. I don't think that's great, because the majority. I mean, on my social media feeds, I get a lot of this stuff. Like writers saying what they've learned from having a book out, and they just hundreds and hundreds of different things. Um, and I think all you're really, sorry, not I'm not accusing anybody of anything, and each to their own, and for a lot of those people out there doing that stuff, it's part of their process of understanding the
Yeah.
industry as well, right? And nobody's. I don't think anybody's out there trying to, on a grift or anything. But what I'm saying is that by flooding the internet with advice, you're just encouraging people who want to sit down and write stories. You're encouraging them away from the story writing and into a position of marketing and self-promotion, where like you said, and I've discovered this as well, is the only thing that's going to get you success. The only thing that's guaranteed to get you success, and that's not a guarantee of success, but the only thing that is going to work, if anything works, is concentrating on your writing.
Yeah. It's i- the more you write, the better you get. Like, the more you paint, if you want to be a good painter, paint more. If you want to be a really good sketch artist, sketch more. And if you want to be a really good writer, write more and experiment as well. I mean, I've written so many different things over the years, like so many different things, apart from the 6 children's novels that are long in the bin. I've written journalistic pieces, loads of journalistic pieces. I've written essays. I've written loads of poems. I've written plays. I've written short films. I've written feature films. Scripts and stuff. And it's like, you, all of those, like, nothing's wasted. I think
Mm.
this is the thing that people sometimes feel like, oh, if I want to be a novelist, and it's like, but actually, maybe the stories that you want to tell fit better as short stories, or they might fit better as performance pieces. So maybe they might work for kind of radio or for audio, or that maybe they might work in the theatre. So it's like, by doing it, you will find out those, where your stories might best fit, what your voice is, and what sort of stories you want to tell and why. And I think if you can figure that out, that's the thing that will help you kind of focus your attention down onto whatever it is that ends up being kind of the 1 or 2 different mediums that you might work in. But I think there is that thing of like, there's sort of a sense of quick, I've got to get published, and I've got to get published now. And it's like,
Mm.
no one can tell if anyone's going to get published. I mean, I don't know, each book, I mean, without it sounding like Quantum Leap, each book might be my last. But, it's like that
Yeah.
thing of, I don't know if I'll get published in the future. It's,
I'd never thought of it like Quantum Leap before. That's a
to
complete,
paraphrase Quantum Leap.
because
But it is, isn't it? It's like each leap might be his last.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah. But
you don't,
I
there's no
always do that
guarantees.
to myself. I always say that, because I remember my first book came out and I didn't enjoy it. I didn't take time to enjoy it because I was too busy worried about, well, this cannot be my only book. I mean, it turns out it wasn't, but through a weird set of relationships and circumstances. But I didn't take time to enjoy it. Since I was like 8 years old, I'd wanted to write books, and at 35, I had a book out, and I was just immediately filled with anxiety that it might be my only one. so,
Yeah.
so
But again, I
telling
think that,
yourself that it might never happen again, if nothing else, forces you to enjoy it while it's happening.
yeah. And I think that's the thing. I didn't enjoy Bear Mouth coming out at all. I was so, stressed and frightened and feeling very exposed. Whereas now what I realize is that for me, it's about the process. I'm really I'm less interested in the book when it's finished because I've finished it.
Mm.
I know what happens. So, people kind of, oh, have you listened to the audiobook and have you done? No, I know what happens. No, I listen to I listen to a bit of it because it's always interesting to hear how someone else has interpreted your words. So I listen to a bit of it and then I don't want to listen to the rest because I know what I know what happens and I know how it happens and I know the exact flipping words in which it happens. So there's no surprises for me. So I don't want to listen to it.
And there's so many other books out there you could be reading during that time,
Exactly,
right?
right? Exactly. There's new stuff out there, and like stuff new to me that's really old. There's all these
Yeah.
lovely, delicious things to kind of discover. But I do, I find that I kind of disengage with it, and I think this isn't. I don't think this is an uncommon thing, but that's the thing that is most exciting for me is the idea that's going to burn its way out, and you have to go. Oh, I was going to do that next, but you're really annoying me, so I'm going to have to do you next. Actually, God, it's really annoying. It's screwed up my plans, But having the freedom to do that because I'm not in like a big long kind of 5-book contract or anything like that. Because I want to write the stuff that's exciting, and it's that thing of I want it to be a challenge as well because that keeps me going throughout it. Because if I can complete it, if I can kind of get that first draft done and work out the shape of it, and then also crucially work out what's wrong with it and how to fix it, that's the exciting bit. It's all puzzles basically. Can I do this puzzle? Can I do this puzzle? Can I do this puzzle? And then like when you finish a crossword, you're like, done that then, next, because I want the next.
Yeah, you get 3.5 seconds of enjoyment out of finishing a crossword, and then you're like, right,
yeah.
okay.
Right, that's on. Yeah,
Start
and
again.
I sort of feel like that. I feel exactly the same with kind of books, and I think this again, it's quite common with a lot of writers that we've already written another book by the time book, the first book comes out, and so we're sort of having to talk about a book that for us is really old news, and we can't necessarily remember all the details in it that you might want us to, because we're really excited about this next thing, and that's the thing that we want to talk about, the new shiny thing. So it's really interesting as well. Like I think particularly having. So Teller of Tall Tales will be my 5th book. And I have people sometimes ask me, like my historical fiction novels that I did for kind of grown-ups, they'll ask me specific sort of historical facty questions like, oh, but what in 1896 did, and sometimes I can pluck it out of my head. And other times I think, I've taped over that bit of information. I could have done a TED talk at the time, but now it's gone, and it is funny because you sort of, in the same way that I discover books that are new to me, but they're, however old, that you forget that people discover your books like that as well. And then they want to ask you those questions because that book is fresh and new to them. Whereas you're kind of going, what order does that happen in the book? I can't remember. Was that the bit I edited? So, I can't remember now. It's just a very odd thing, isn't it, really?
It is an odd thing. Engaging with readers is quite an odd thing. I mean, most writers, I think, quite enjoy it, but I was at the Hay Festival this year and I went to see, this is slightly off topic, but also slightly connected. I went to see Lionel Shriver, who I like as a novelist a great deal, although obviously she's largely despised by the general public. But there was, her latest novel is about immigration and it's anti-immigration and all that. So there was quite a few people, there was a lot of tuts and a few hisses in the audience as she was being interviewed. Which I think is one of the things that Hay is great for, right? I mean, the Hay Festival really well, obviously. Yeah. It's great for because other places sort of profess to have a diversity of voices and ideas, but Hay genuinely does, and to have somebody like Lionel Shriver on stage, when some really like liberal world leader is on the stage next door, I think is one of the great strengths. But they were 2 young guys, and they were very much of the sort of just by looking at them, you could tell they were part of like the woke, young woke millennial Gen Z elite or whatever they were, mullets.
Gary, how judgmental of you!
Well, I am a judgmental person, and I will wear that. I will wear that proudly. But they were doing a lot of tutting and hissing and whispering to each other while she was talking, and then the Q&A came up, and the one guy put his hand up, and they were sat right in front of me, and I thought, oh God, I don't like confrontation. This is going to be like, oh no. go. Oh, this is good. So the chair came to the question, and he and the guy stood up, and I thought, here we go. Oh my God, this is going to be awful. And he asked a really detailed, nuanced question about the develop of characters through about 5 of her novels, which he'd obviously read and reread. And it was a really fascinating question that she was kind of like really engaged with and was kind of grateful for, I think, as well. Because it was he'd read her, not only read her novels, but read them really closely. And I thought that was interesting because he clearly despised her from a political point of view, but clearly very much admired her and enjoyed her as a writer.
I think she's a really. I mean, I kind of, that's sort of my. I think she's a really interesting writer. But yes, I mean, I know she just. I'm not a fan of. She's bitterness. There's a lot of bitterness, I think,
Yeah,
and I don't think that's ever somewhere that positive change comes from.
yeah.
Really,
I think she's one
I
of
mean,
those.
she's very right wing, and I'm not. So
Yeah,
she
yeah,
is
yeah.
absolutely right wing, and I am very much not.
But
So
I think you can trace, like, over. I mean, I could be wrong on this, but her like right wing position, um, the reaction to her right wing position has pushed her further and further to the right, rather
I think
than
that's the case. Yeah, I think that's the
yeah,
case with many people. Actually,
yeah,
I think that's something that we kind of. I mean, we could talk about social media for quite a long time, I'm sure. But and the financial benefits it reaps from sowing the seeds of division. I mean, that's such
Well,
a an interesting thing.
I'm interested in that question of social media, but let's not get into the politics of stuff because I think it's covered a lot. But from a writer's point of view, social media has changed like an enormous amount since you and I first met, which was I don't know, 15 years ago or whatever, and being on something like Twitter. I mean, I used to get work through Twitter as a writer.
Mm.
Um, it was a absolutely exhilarating place to be as a writer, to meet other writers, to talk to writers that you
Yeah,
admire, and and now it's social media is, I think, is almost entirely useless to
yeah,
anybody, any profession. I mean, I don't know
yeah.
if that last bit is true because I'm not of any profession, but what do you think? Because also, particularly as working in, as you say, like you're working in YA, you've written a couple of books in YA and a couple of adult books for a different podcast.
Whoa.
Oh, um, but particularly the emphasis on children's writers, which includes YA, for the benefits
Mm.
of this conversation. Um, Social media presence and having some kind of social media presence is always deemed as like important and useful. Have you seen that change a lot since since you've known it, but since Bearmouth came out? Did you say 7 years ago?
I think lots of things have changed in that time as well. I think so. One of the big things that's changed is obviously the kind of death of traditional media. I mean, it's not completely dead yet, but I feel very much it's a stick prodding a half
Wow, I mean,
half alive corpse.
did you see
But
the
like
proposed cuts to the BBC this week? Like another £500 million over the next 2 years. I think that's not
yeah,
great.
it's no, and also to cut news as well, which is somewhere that they've been getting a lot of criticism for. So it's
Mm,
like I just but a lot of the places that used to cover children's books now don't, or they have reduced coverage, or that outlet doesn't exist anymore. And I think that's the reason why so many kind of people are encouraged to be on social media, is if that's going to make up the gap.
mm,
Whereas really what you're doing is talking to yourself on a lot on social media, or you're sharing stuff effectively as I suppose sort of Facebook originally was intended to be, with your friends, with people who you actually know in real life.
yeah,
And I think where they've become more and more paid for services, despite the fact that they're advertising at you all the time as well, and they're taking your material in the small print where you haven't read it properly and you've agreed to terms and conditions to train, their AI on and whatever. I feel like, yeah, I think a lot of us are only still really on it out of kind of habit and nostalgia and I suppose hope that it might return to being less useless than it currently is. I mean, a lot of people have said to me, "Oh, why aren't you on TikTok?" Because like it's just another time waste for me.
Yeah.
Ultimately, as we were sort of saying earlier, I could be making great little short films on TikTok. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? Making little short films on TikTok, but I'm not writing. So, do I want to be a short filmmaker or do I want to write something? And I want to write something, so therefore I'm not going to join TikTok. Um, I think the pressures on children's authors are quite different now, and I think one of the things that I think children's authors are very much expected to do now is to be able to stand up in front of huge groups of children and do jazz hands at them and be a children's entertainer.
Mm.
I mean, I love doing that. I will not lie. Give me a microphone and a stage, I'm a happy bunny. I love it because it scratches my performance itch with the stakes are low because they can't escape and they're not drunk. So it's great as far as I'm concerned. But that's a very different skill set. It's a very different skill set, but we are expected as children's authors to be able to run workshops, do presentations, engage with like huge numbers of children, go in and do an assembly, do public speaking, do all these different things, none of which is to do with writing books for children. They're all sort of over there, kind of, not connected, but not actually about the writing.
Can you
and I think
imagine
that's
if they'd forced Roald Dahl to go in and do things like that? It would have been absolute chaos. It would have been live butchery. It would have been.
yeah, this is the thing. It's like I think they are very different skill sets, and I'm lucky in that I love running workshops, and I love kind of sort of hanging out with children and trying to make them laugh and getting them to engage in their own creativity. I think it's a hugely fun like sort of exchange of energy. I love it, but I also don't feel that. I feel very strongly that children's writers shouldn't feel like they have to do those things because I don't think a lot of people are necessarily comfortable doing it, and therefore they're not going to do the best workshop or the best assembly or whatever. And I think that's a shame as well because I think that's also something that social media kind of can amplify.
It's also so like embedded into the marketing culture of children's literature. I remember seeing I won't say who it was because in case I sort of tiptoe into areas that might get me into sort of legal trouble, but I saw a famous person who's written some children's books. I mean, that could be anyone, right? That could be any famous person.
I mean, that could be lots of different children's authors.
Exactly, yeah. And so we went to see her. Well, that that narrows it down. But we went to see her at the Hay Festival again for reasons of other fame. But she was also there doing some children's book events, and my wife saw her in the bookshop afterwards signing books, and so clearly detests children. Like it was coming out of every pore in her body that just having them near was a little bit gross and a little bit sort of that it was hilarious. But to me it said like, well, you've there's a chance, because we all know this happens, that you've kind of talked this famous person into doing some children's books for you. And now you force them to go and do book signings and meet the kids, and I think that's just unfair. But it shows how powerful that marketing that is in embedded into the marketing culture of children's literature.
But also, I just find that that's fascinating in itself, like for so many different reasons. But why would you write a book for children if you don't like children?
I don't know. Could it have something to do with
do you know what I mean? Like, I find that's a really, that just seems a bit.
Yeah, it was a
bit baffling.
Yeah, I think the books were quite successful. I mean, this would have been before my little boy was born, probably, although not that long ago, but maybe like pre-COVID. So we wouldn't have had any real sort of understanding of children's books around that time. But But yeah, but that's I mean that's quite a famous thing as well, isn't it? Like apparently Enid Blyton hated kids and Beatrix Potter like hated kids, and so that's like I suppose that's not that unusual. I would never dare say that this person or anybody else was writing children's books just for the check. They must have something. They must have something in them that wants to write, stories for kids. Roald Dahl wasn't tempted into it by fees, was he? Really, he obviously saw something that was quite freeing in the narrative elements of children's storytelling, where he could put all of these really dark themes into dark characters and dark themes that in a way that he couldn't have done in his writing for adults.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think you can go. I mean, Bearmouth is a really dark book.
All of your books are dark in their own ways.
Yeah,
so.
that's true. They're fairly.
They're also,
and yet I'm so jovial in real life. But I like. Oh, sorry, I'm just breaking my desk. Yeah, I mean, I think I like dark. The darkness makes the light shine brighter, right? Like, oh god,
Yeah.
that sounds naff. That sounds like it should be on a poster with a picture of a sunset on Instagram, motivational quote. But I do like, the darkness makes the humour funnier. Have I told you? I don't know if I've ever told you this story before. So years ago, when I was in National Youth Theatre and I was doing like the design side of things, I wasn't acting, but they did a production of Macbeth, and the Porter scene is never really. I've never loved the Porter scene, and I'm sure, like many of your listeners, like forced to study it at school. It is my favourite Shakespeare. I have to say, I think it's an absolutely phenomenal play. But the Porter scene, it's just never quite. It's just never quite stuck with me, apart from this one production, and it was when I was at National Youth Theatre, and I've never seen it bettered, and it makes me laugh every time I think about it. And the Porter, the actor playing the Porter, was brilliant, and he was absolutely acting his socks off, and he just wasn't getting that much reaction from the audience. And he just walked straight down to the front of the stage, and then he just leant forward and he said, "I'd laugh if I were you, because it's the only chance you're going to get." Oh, brilliant. And that that the king's being murdered while that's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, he brought the house down, obviously, but it was such a brilliant little extra bit to add in. But I do think of that quite often, because I think that actually that is what I like, that darkness, because then it makes the humour even more.
You carry that around with you when you're writing?
I'd laugh if I were you, silly John. My books aren't that dark.
So I mean, some of them.
Bearmouth's the darkest, I think, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do.
But your work, and I always think that this is a very dark literary theme, right? Is that there are worlds we don't understand happening underneath the surface, and that is what is, I mean, literally in Bearmouth, but that is what is the common theme in your work. And it sounds like it will be in the new book as well, even if it's just the fact that there's a there's a meta-textual element to the book, to your new book. But but there is always something going on under the surface. There are things we don't understand happening under the surface. You're talking about M.R. James earlier. That's kind of what, M.R. James is interesting, because quite often the ghostliness of it is about things we don't understand rather than apparitions, or white women or the women in black, or that's not what M.R. James really is doing. It's about things we don't really understand under the surface, and that's what I always take from your work.
Oh, I really like that. That's really interesting. Yeah. I was thinking about M.R. James the other day. I was thinking about the Warning to the Curious, where there's that figure that shouldn't be there, because that figure is not from now. And it's in the TV adaptation is particularly frightening. And there's the figure that shouldn't be there, and it turns and looks at you. Number one, that's horrifically frightening anyway, but then it runs towards you. That's the thing that's the thing. It's such a simple thing, but that absolute terror that just gives me And all it is all it is, or all it could be interpreted as, is just someone turning and looking at you and running towards you, which in itself isn't frightening. But how to make that terrifying is sort of such an interesting thing. I mean, I think Emma James is a brilliant writer. Yeah, I don't know. I think I am interested in that. I think it's that also that the things people don't say, like the subtext, I think is always such an interesting thing. And I think because I love theatre so much, and because I sort of secretly wanted to be a playwright when I was younger, I think there's often sort of like a slight kind of theatricality in my writing as well, I think. And I think there is that element of wanting to have that gap. I think Jackie Morris calls it the gap between words. So the gaps between words and the gaps between sentences that you as the reader can fill in. There is that, if you overwrite it, if it's kind of overwritten, there's nowhere for us to place ourselves in it, and so we get kind of pushed away from it. And I think that's something that I kind of think about a lot as well. But yeah, I hadn't really thought about it like that, but that's really interesting. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I like that. I think I will think on that.
Well, I was just thinking, like, you look at your, like the writing around your work, the writing on your work, like Alan Garner often pops up. And that's what I always, I mean, particularly with like the 12, you can see the connections with Garner, directly with Garner's worlds there. But Garner always, to me, he's like the archetypal writer of the veil, the world's happening beyond the one we experience. And I think that's what connects you to him more than things that happen in the 12 and some of the structural elements of the 12. I think that it's a thematic connection. I think anybody who's writing generally is preoccupied with those veils, I think, is attached to Garner in some ways.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I love Garner. I think he's absolutely fascinating. And Boneland's probably my favourite one of his. I've read it so many times, and I described it to someone once. It's like it's the literary equivalent of smoke. Is that I can't quite grasp it, and then I reread it, and I'm sure there's bits that weren't in there last time that I read it, even though I only read it a few years ago. And it is such an odd book. And I love Treacle Walker as well. Actually, I think Treacle Walker is extraordinary. But yeah, I think I'm very interested in a lot of similar things to him. I am really interested in. I'm fascinated by archaeology. I'm interested in the sort of in deep history and deep human history, particularly. I think there's something really profoundly interesting about going to places where people lived or worshipped, or if you go to Avebury or Stonehenge, or you go to any of the sort of, or like small stone circles, or like just small kind of burial chambers, like the one that's sort of on the edge of Manabir, that's in the 12. That you just think people made this, they placed this here, and we can kind of get, well, it's a burial chamber, so we know that it must have had bones or remains in at some stage. But just why here, and why this view? And I think that kind of connection to the past, and also just feeling like they would have looked up at the sun 6,000 years ago and felt the warmth of it on their face and how lovely that was, or see a load of bees buzz past and heard that lovely hum and smiled, or laughed and cried and felt loss and grief. And I think it's quite easy to I think look at people in the past as, and even the words like primitive, like kind of primitive, sort of primitive civilizations, and you go, yeah, but primitive. I mean, I wouldn't last 2 days if you chucked me out in the wild. I mean, if I break my glasses, I'm screwed. Like that's it, I'm dead. The bear is going to have a nice meal for a couple of nights. It's so I just always think it's really interesting that I think there is that kind of. I am really interested in those things. I'm really interested in those remnants from the past, and kind of those elements of stories that are, in place names, in history, in the landscape. I think it is a really fascinating thing. So I think there is that sort of strong kind of connection, I guess, with quite a few other writers that have gone before who are also interested in those same things, really. And I think living here, I live in Ludlow, in Shropshire, and there are hill forts on pretty much every hill around here, and there's lots of sort of interesting stories and folklore, and that kind of, obviously, the Marches kind of border area between England and Wales is castled on every on every hummock as you go up. But the shift of the boundaries and the way that Welsh language is here in so many of the place names. But we're in England, but obviously Ludlow was once the sort of administrative capital of Wales, and so there's like lots of. It's fascinating. Sorry, I went off on one then.
No, but that is interesting because we're talking about those veils even now. We're talking about those worlds beyond the ones that we see, and that is what we're talking about is history, right? Like you talk about the attitudes towards prehistoric cultures, which you see in all we've got is those tombs and those stone circles and those the remnants of domiciles. There are sort of connections, and we assume because we've got no plays or no written culture, that they had no culture, and yet we seem to be doing everything we can to erase or to move on or to disregard our own sense of culture at every opportunity.
Yeah, and the homogenization of culture, I think the dominance, and again, touching on the sort of social media again, the dominance of America and American social media companies and American big tech companies, and the dominance of the language, and how that's shifting the language here, particularly amongst kind of younger kids. I mean, for sort of my generation, we all had slightly Aussie accents because we all watched Home and Away and Neighbours. Whereas now that kind of a lot of American language has sort of snuck in. And I mean, it's interesting because language always changes. I'm not going to be a snob about it, but I worry that the homogenization of sort of culture crushes the stuff that makes sort of our culture interesting and makes us really, in a way. The fact that we are an island of immigrants, we've been an island of immigrants since Britain first, since Doggerland sunk, it's like we are an island of immigrants. But the kind of, I think we should sort of celebrate all the histories more. I think we should, it's looking beyond the surface, I think. And it's scratching at kind of, wherever you live, even if your road is new and you live somewhere that's relatively new, I bet the name of the place harks back to something else. A lot of new build places that are called like Nightingale Meadow or something, and they are actually named after somewhere where nightingales did once used to sing. But those sort of
there's a house built on the tree.
Yeah, but it's like the echoes of kind of what was there before. I think it's really interesting. It's just I think you should always be curious about the world.
Yeah,
I think that's the way to kind of.
Do you think the evolving nature of online is making? I think there's a battle between content creation and curiosity. I'm already like utterly bored by AI. I wasn't that interested in it at all, but I'm not like the smartest guy in the room, but it didn't take me long to get the measure of AI, right? And the moment I was sat in the BBC recently in the canteen on my own, I should say. I sit there on my own sometimes, every time. Sat there on my own, and there were like 2 or 3 guys on the table next to me who were talking about, oh yeah, no, I've been using AI to do this and do this. And it's really fascinating that it does this. And they were talking about it like, like it was just this amazing cultural shift, and it's just not, right? It's just not. It's so at the moment it's still a really bad tool, right? It's just not interesting. Everything without fail that AI is generating is boring. It's absolutely boring. Like, I was at first interested in, like, oh, I get on my algorithm. Oh, this is interesting. There's like a 3-minute AI generated documentary about Custer's last stand. And you're like, well, this is interesting. Is it? No, it isn't. It's much less interesting than watching a Ken Burns documentary for 9 hours on the subject or reading a book about it. It's not like these bite-sized AI-generated moments that are supposed to make us, and they're not supposed to make us interested. They're supposed to make us stay on the platform. That's all they're trying to make us do, stay on the platform.
So you can be advertised to more so they can
Yeah.
make more money.
Yeah.
And so that they can learn more about what you're clicking on so that they can directly target you with even more specific marketing, which they're
Perfect.
charging people for.
Yeah, if I'm clicking on Little Bighorn, I'll just get more AI-generated 3-minute documentaries about moments of the American West.
But also, again, I think it's James Marriott's really interesting on that. I don't know if you read him. So he used to be, I think, deputy books editor at the Times, and he's now a columnist there. But he's got a really interesting Substack, and he's got he did a series for Radio 4 relatively recently, and his book is about a similar thing. It's about kind of the death of literacy and how that's affecting society and how it could affect society in the future and how it's affecting culture. He's a really, really interesting writer. And he was saying something which is sort of one of those things. It's really obvious when someone else has said it, or where you kind of go, "Oh yeah, no, I have thought that," but not sort of put it as eloquently as he has. Which is just that all those little short clips of things. It's not just about your attention span; it's about emotional reaction. And so, if you're going to talk about something that has got more nuance to it, it's difficult to do that on a social media platform because it's too short. So it's, if you say, well, actually, no, your statistics are wrong. I saw someone say the other day somewhere on Facebook that no mow May doesn't work, it's bad for nature, and that we should all cut the grass more often. And I thought, that's interesting because they've not cited any evidence. So I thought, I'm going to go and look. And actually what I discovered was that as I think a lot of people know, like Plant Life basically were the people who kind of started doing it to encourage, more flowers and for longer. And actually what the academic study that I found from 2022 cited was that actually it'd be better if you extended it into June because a lot of flowers only really reach their peak nectar right at the end of May and into early June. So it'd be better if we had no May plus also no mow June, But what was also interesting is that I found a lot of American stuff that said it doesn't work in America. And it doesn't work in America because they've got a lot of invasive species like dandelions. I did feel quite proud of dandelions then for some reason. Yes, get in dandelions. Dandelions, which are obviously, pretty invasive, huge, massive root system or whatever, that they'll scatter their seeds much more. And that is problematic. And that America's got a lot more sort of common invasive species than we have. So I thought, I haven't gone back to this woman yet, but I'm sure I will do at some stage later today. That I just thought, isn't that interesting? Because I don't know if that's just something that they've kind of heard, it's a hearsay thing and they've just repeated it, or if she has looked it up and has actually found really quite a lot of American things which are skewing what the statistics actually are, which the statistics are in Britain, is great, it really works, but also we actually need to extend it for a bit longer. So I just thought, and again, that's a really good example of like how that American dominance,
that's interesting,
of Tinternet generally in the English language can skew those things as well. Yeah,
that's really. I've also found recently I've discovered how lazy AI is when you're trying to find things out. It's happened a few times. Like 3 or 4 times recently where I've asked like ChatGPT a question because I kind of use it as a search engine that I can be a little bit ruder to. But I've asked it questions and it's got the answers wrong, right? And I know like everyone talks about how wrong it is, and there's even disclaimers on some AI searches now where it says, it's sometimes wrong. But just how wrong it's been. And the example I was using, I asked for a particular MP's vote on a bill in Parliament. How did, not my MP, but somebody I know, how did they vote on this bill? And they said, oh, they voted in favour of the bill. And I was like, God, that's really disappointing. And I just clicked through onto the Parliament website and looked at the voting record, and they'd abstained. And I went back to chat and I said, chat, they didn't vote in favour of it. They abstained. And no word of a lie, chat went, oh yeah, I just assumed they had because like 300 Labour MPs had voted in favour and they were a Labour MP. And I said, yeah,
So
but
statistically, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
2 clicks for me to look at the voting record and to see that, and AI just went, yeah, you're right. I just assumed and didn't click through. I wasn't thorough enough. AI just said I wasn't very thorough with that. I'm sorry about that. Just like, if ever you need to know if AI is programmed by a man, just check out how lazy it is. Wouldn't even click through to read the actual results.
It's interesting, isn't it, as well? I mean, I can't, I'm sure like all your listeners will know that all the large language models have been basically trained on stolen material.
Yeah.
But I am constantly surprised at how few people know this. I don't think there's been enough fuss made about it. And I think it's great that, you know, Elton John and McCartney and PJ Harvey and lots of musicians and lots of writers and, you know, lots of artists and illustrators have all been kind of banging the drum about it. But I still feel like a lot of people don't know. They just don't know. But I find it really odd when people kind of go, I'm going to use AI to help with my ideas. And it's like, but then they're not your ideas.
Yeah.
They're ideas from me and from you, Gary, and from everyone from, you know, that the famous person who wrote the children's book to Lionel Shriver to whoever. It's like, they're not your, they're all those ideas that have all been stolen. They're not your ideas, but also the ideas and the writing and the joy of writing. Was it someone said recently? I can't remember who it was. Forgive me, I can't remember who it was. But they said, "Why would I outsource writing to AI? It's like outsourcing sex." And I just thought, it made me laugh. But I thought we don't talk enough about the joy of writing. Actually, there's such a joy in getting a sentence absolutely, you know, just so. You know, I've got a friend of mine who's fantastic. He's irritatingly kind of polymathy, you know. He's brilliant, an annoyingly nice man as well. The brilliant Kevin McNeil. He's an absolute master at haiku. And I said to him, I'd rather write a novel than write a haiku, right? But I love the mental exercise of it. Like, I'd never write haikus to be published, but as a mental exercise, they're a really fun thing of like, how can I describe this view? Or how could I sum up that conversation I've just had with my neighbour? Or like, they're just as a little kind of fun intellectual exercise. I find them really fun now because he's converted me into the joy of haiku. But I just, the sheer joy of playing with language, playing with language and like I say, like, getting a description just so, or, you know, if you give that over to AI, then what you're not writing, you're just fannying around.
Yeah,
which is fine if you want to fanny around. I mean, you know, but to say that you want to be a writer and then outsource any of it to AI, I just find peculiar.
Completely true. Liz, thank you. We've gone on and we could have gone on much further, but
I've got angry at the end as well. I'll go write another book now.
I know. What a great way to finish. Liz, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and talking to us.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
With an audience of one, you are